All right, thank you. On each of your tables, you'll find a bag of puzzle pieces. All right, so if you were to take a look at the bags of puzzle pieces at your table, I'd like to ask you, how would you start putting that puzzle together? Corners, okay, very good, very good. Appreciate you saying that, good answer. It's been my experience that building and sustaining healthy relationships is like putting a 1,000-piece puzzle together. The first thing you do is find the four corners, then you go to the edges, and then you start filling in the rest of the pieces. And if you can picture the rest of the pieces as time. So I'd like to share my experience and my story about the four corners of building and sustaining healthy relationships, okay? I started 42 years ago, as Glenda introduced, and coffee was 20 cents a cup, and I weighed 130 pounds, so that's a long time ago. All right, okay. All right. I dropped out of college, I married my soulmate, and became a restaurant owner, manager. I bought a restaurant on contract, and as Glenda said, by 1985, I was living the American dream. We had 4 children, 3 boys and a girl, several businesses, and life was good. In 1985, in August of 85, our fifth child, Clay, was born, and he only lived for a couple of days. He had a bad heart, and he died. That was the first of many challenges to come. In 1986, I, for some reason, was investigated by the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, which that's when they come knocking on your door. They've got their badges, they have their guns, they want to take inventory of everything in your house. That was a 19-month-long process. And by the way, that's a whole nother story, but they didn't find anything wrong, okay? I actually upset a couple of politicians, that's what happened. But anyway, so I go ahead and we keep going and growing, and then I split. I was in business with my brother. We went our separate ways. Then, in the early 1990s, my oldest son was facing some problems with drugs, and things just kept going downhill from there. And by 1991, life wasn't very good. I had a lot of issues. So I went from the American dream to the American nightmare. And in 95, they started a 19-month construction project in front of my cash cow of one of my restaurants, where the sales dropped from $1 million a year in sales to under $500,000. So things just kept going downhill from there. And then in 2001, my dad passed away, unexpectedly. So I went from the American dream to the American nightmare. And then the next 10 years started getting better. And then, let me get to the next slide, May 28, 2010, just as things have been getting better for quite some time, I had this stroke where it paralyzed my left side. I was in the hospital for 6 weeks. During that time, though, I had many people come and visit me, and I felt blessed as they shared their stories. I had kids I had coached in high school and in middle school. I had people that used to work for me. I even had people I fired that came up to see me. And it was just I just felt blessed as they shared their stories with me. So that kind of leads me into the first of the 4 corners. First, you have to agree on direction, all right? And so how do you get from this to this, all right? How do you do that? Well, first off, it has to be, every healthy relationship, everyone has to win. You have to do it that way. So how do you get from, let me go back, from this to this? You've got to ask the right questions. You've got to say things like, help me understand. You have to sit down there and really listen. Then you have to share your concerns. So as you do that, and you ask the questions, the next thing you have to do is really listen. Do you listen with the intent to already know what your answer is going to be? Do you sit down there and already waiting to say the next thing, or do you truly listen to the questions and really, people don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. You have to really listen. With that being said, How do you walk together unless you agree on direction? How do two people walk together unless they agree on direction? And you have to do that by listening. Dalai Lama said this: when you talk, you only are repeating what you already know. But when you listen, you may learn something new. Okay? How many times have you put your foot in your mouth? Or in some cases, maybe both feet. I've done that a few times, all right? You need to be quick to listen and slow to speak. Again, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You have to be able to truly listen. And you have to be, or do you find yourself in a conversation trying to convince people rather than really listening? Here's the next corner, is trust. You have to have trust in that relationship. How many times do you find yourself in a conversation, trying to convince the other person they're wrong? All right? Instead of finding the common ground to walk together. With trust, you have to have it. If you don't have it, trust takes a long time to build, only seconds to break, and forever to rebuild. I could get into a story about, you heard about the 5 muffler shops I had. I went into business with a guy, and we were 50-50 partners. And our agreement is I would put the business plan together, get the financing lined out. We need to borrow $20,000 to get started with the first muffler shop. With that being said, I borrowed the money. We said, we got to pay this money back before we take any money out ourselves. And he agreed to that. He was getting paid $50 more a week going to work for himself and for me than he was in his old job. So it wasn't like, he had any reason to steal or anything. I was there every day after I got off from work from my restaurants. I went over and learned how to put on mufflers and do all that. Then I started building my dream home in 1978. In the time it took, I don't know if any of you ever built a home, but it takes a lot of time. You got to just make a lot of decisions. So whenever that happened, I got away from the day-to-day part of it. And he calls me up one day and says, Larry, we need to go borrow some more money. And keep in mind, in 6 months, we had saved $10,000 to pay back the original $20,000 loan that we had. I go, well, what happened to the money? He goes, we just had a lot of expenses. I said, okay, well, let me get into the books and let's find out what the deal was. To my surprise, he bought his wife a new wedding ring, put a down payment on a house. He went through like the $10,000 like it was nothing. I didn't know what to do. This guy was my friend. We played softball together. We did a lot of other things together. He was my friend. And I was just torn up. It's the only time in my life I ever didn't sleep the whole night. All right? Anyway, make a long story short, I realized if you didn't have trust, you had no business being in that relationship. So, now you probably heard some of these other things before, but the next corner you probably haven't heard, or maybe you haven't thought about. And the next corner is margin. All right? We all have 24 hours in one day. And you all plan your day out on everything you're going to get done. Do you plan on margin in your day? All right? Margin is very important to building stronger relationships because stronger relationships take time. All right? It gives you peace. Margin gives you peace. It gives you less stress. It leads for better health. If I would have known this is one of these lessons at the School of Hard Knocks, I probably wouldn't have had my stroke. I just had too much going on. I was planning. Bill can attest. Very successful, made a lot of money, did a lot of good things, but I just had a lot of pressure on things. So I didn't allow that margin and that peace. All right. I did that through being able to prioritize things. So you have to prioritize truly, start with the end in mind. The four-corner approach saves you stress, time, energy, and money. Let me get into this briefly. Would you rather be a travel agent or a tour guide? And you're thinking, what's he talking about? Let's talk about how they're similar. Similarities are they both are friendly and knowledgeable, both help people get to where they want to go. A travel agent will take you to it, will talk you to it rather, where a tour guide will walk you through it. The travel agent will point you there, a tour guide will take you there. Where the travel agent will sit there and wave goodbye to you, where the other one takes your hand and says hello. A travel agent will leave you with information, where a tour guide will leave you with appreciation. All right? So which of these are you, and which would you rather be? Travel agent or tour guide? The lessons learned. The key to building and sustaining healthy relationships are these four corners. Whether it's a personal or your business, you have to agree on direction, you have to listen, you have to show that you care by asking the right questions, you have to have trust, you need margin, and you need to ask yourself, are you a travel agent or a tour guide? So when you look back, do you look back with reward or regret? And now I only have like 3 minutes left. Do you have any questions? Any thoughts? Yes, sir.
Okay, when you say margin, tell me, define that for me, what you're kind of talking about that, because there's any number of ways to define the word.
Margin is a space or the time you allow yourself to where if something doesn't go exactly right or the way you have it planned, you still have time to deal with that. Okay? You bet.
How have you used these principles to build the most important relationship in your life, being the one with yourself?
Well, I go back to the first slide, and that would be my family. That's the most important relationship I have. Those are my 3 children, and my grandchildren, and we're all very close today. Well, if you like to see pictures, we have 3 St. Bernards, but I didn't get them in the picture. All right. But to that point, on the business side of it, I think that's the foundation of being able to grow the business from the 23 states 12 years ago when I started with the company to the 48 states we're in today. Because when you do that, those relationships, you have trust, you build on that. They aren't out looking for other people to do what you do, and it provides a very solid foundation to grow. Any other questions or thoughts? Yes?
I just have a comment. I know that faith is a big part of
Yes.
how you have a relationship with yourself and with God. So,
Right.
When Paulette, I know that your faith is very strong, and that sustains you, and that's something that's really important to you.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up because I could also have done the same PowerPoint presentation based in Scripture. Every one of those points, I can quote you chapter and verse. So if you'd like to find out more information, I'd be happy to share it. Thanks for bringing that up. Any other thoughts? Well, I thank everyone for their time today. Thank you.